Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 4, Episode 42. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. It's the third Saturday in October. That can only mean one thing: Tennessee, Alabama. Nico has some growing up to do, and if he does some growing up, I like Tennessee's chances against Alabama. If he doesn't do some growing up, this is going to be an ugly Saturday. Good television is good. There is a show that I highly recommend that you watch, dear listener, called The Terror, Terror, The Terror on Netflix. And let's go Mets. Thank you all to my loyal listeners. If you're new to this podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Let's go.
Act 1, Tennessee versus Alabama. Nico has some growing up to do.
Well, it's the third Saturday of October, and that can only mean one thing: Tennessee, Alabama. The age-old rivalry that has, more often than not, been a dark day for the good guys. Tennessee has come out on the wrong side of that outcome too many a time in my young life. And although the game is in Neyland Stadium, Tennessee at home, and although Alabama has lost already in the SEC to one Vanderbilt no less, I am not optimistic about the outcome of this game. And I want to express as much on this podcast because I believe in Nico and I believe in Bobby Hill, our head coach. More on that to come. But I also believe that we're dealing with a kid who is a true sophomore, and he is not one of these quarterbacks that's going to break out and have a great season and be able to go to the NFL, as we've seen with, well, nobody. That's right. It's been rare that we've seen a sophomore quarterback have a breakout season and then be able to go to the NFL. The fact of the matter is, this kid is a kid. There was a lot of expectations on Nico, and we're going to get into that as well, why he may have such high expectations, why the Tennessee family may have such high expectations of him. But he's still a sophomore. He still has a lot to figure out about being a quarterback in the SEC and potentially being one in the NFL. And as Nico goes, Tennessee goes. So a couple of years ago, there was a lot of hype around this kid. His name was Nico Iamaleava. Nico Iamaleava was one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the quarterback class for 2022. He ends up committing to Tennessee, and then it comes out that based on this new rule that they have where college athletes can get paid, they get paid on their image, their likeness, and major universities have a bunch of boosters that basically pool their money to give to the highest recruited players all over the country. This kid was going to get $7 million to come to Tennessee. So, highly recruited player, a lot of hype around his recruitment, a lot of hype around his commitment, and a significant financial investment. The quarterback of the future. Last year, Joe Milton elects not to play in a bowl game because he is done with his eligibility. He's going to go into the NFL draft. He doesn't want to compromise his position in the NFL draft by potentially getting hurt in a bowl game. And so Nico makes his debut in the bowl game and plays very well. The hype around Nico is very high. Coming into the season, Tennessee plays teams which, not very highly rated. NC State has now been proven a fraud. Oklahoma somewhat has been proven a fraud. Nico had some good games, but he didn't have a really breakout game against an Oklahoma team that now we know doesn't really have a good defense. And going into an Arkansas team that wasn't really highly rated and wasn't picked by a lot of pundits to place very high in the SEC, Nico lays an egg in the first half. Now, I've seen a number of pundits trying to place the blame on Tennessee's offensive woes on a number of different things, namely the tackles, the fact that the two tackles that had started the season got hurt. There had been a lot of shifting in the offensive line. The two tackles come back, and there is not a lot of cohesive line play, and therefore Nico's under pressure and blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that the line has played great in pass protection, but the offensive line is not the problem. Watching that Arkansas game, particularly in the first half, Nico missed read after read, throw after throw. Throws came late, throws came behind wide receivers, and most importantly, on those breakout routes that Tennessee has capitalized on over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons under this Josh Heupel offense, he just flat out missed throws. He missed wide open guys down the field that would have gone for touchdowns but for the fact that he could not put the ball on a wide open wide receiver. I don't comment a lot on social media, and I'm not going to start, but the response that I would give to many of these commenters and pundits is that Nico is playing very similar to how Joe Milton played when he transferred from Michigan to Tennessee, and he was the starter, and his starting play got him benched in favor of Hendon Hooker, who then had a breakout season and was able to elevate his stock so high that he got drafted in the National Football League and I believe is now playing for the Detroit Lions. All of this after having blown out his knee in a game during the course of a season. That's how highly regarded he was in the offense. Joe Milton played consistent with how Nico Iamaleava is playing now, and that got him benched in favor of another quarterback that took the reins, and it wasn't until the next season that Joe Milton got back under center and had shown so much maturity and development that he was able to keep the starting job. Why then have we not seen Nico Iamaleava get benched? I don't think there's anybody on the roster that can play as well as he does. And I also think that Josh Heupel, the head coach of the University of Tennessee, is looking long-term. This kid is the long-term solution at quarterback at the University of Tennessee. And if he has to experience some growing pains in a game, in a season, then that's what's going to happen. It is an unfortunately accurate meme that Josh Heupel looks exactly like Bobby Hill from King of the Hill. I don't think that Bobby Hill is wrong for sticking with Nico. I don't think that Bobby Hill is wrong for seeing Nico as the future at quarterback at the University of Tennessee, potentially such that his growing pains in 2024 could lead to an undefeated season in 2025. Well, the team is going to undergo those growing pains. I only offer that to you, dear listener, as a pretext to my prediction in the Alabama game. Nico cannot have a first half like he did against Arkansas, like he did against Florida. The Tennessee Vols cannot have 100 yards of offense after the first half of a game with no touchdowns and, in fact, no points and expect to beat Alabama even at home. Even an Alabama team that has lost to Vanderbilt. By the way, in that loss to Vanderbilt, I believe Alabama scored 40 points, and they lost on a last-second touchdown to Vanderbilt in Nashville. Let's put that all together. Alabama scores 40 points on the road. Vanderbilt scores 45 points, I believe it was, against Alabama, which is unheard of, but they were moving the ball and they were scoring points. Alabama's defense could be bad. Alabama could have the worst defense that they've had in the last 10 years. Tennessee cannot allow Alabama's defense to get any confidence based on Nico missing throws, missing reads, throwing behind wide receivers. When you're paying a kid $7 million to play quarterback for you, he damn well better be in there playing quarterback. So it's hard for Bobby Hill to try to bench him. But I believe that the calculus is correct. This kid's the future. Regardless of how much money he's getting paid, we are going to have to suffer through him playing his way through some of these growing pains. But that's not going to help the Vols on the third Saturday in October in the year of our Lord, 2024. Nico is going to have to solve his problems. He's going to have to calm down. He's going to have to stop holding the ball so long. He's going to have to make his reads quicker. He's going to have to put the ball on target. He's not going to be able to throw behind wide receivers. He's going to have to put the ball up in the air and give his wide receivers a chance to run under it when they have beaten the coverage in order to beat Alabama on Saturday, October the 19th, 2024. Otherwise, this game could get ugly, and it could get ugly quick. Tennessee has run the ball effectively in these games where Nico just hasn't been able to put it together. They ran the ball effectively against Oklahoma, against Arkansas, and against Florida. It kept each of those games close. But running the ball effectively against an Alabama team that's offensively dynamic, Alabama is going to be in any game that it plays this season based on the fact that it can score and score quickly. Although this piece may come across as pessimistic, I'm very optimistic leading into the game if I see a Nico Iamaleava that's confident, that is making accurate throws in the pocket, that is not holding the ball for too long, that is allowing his wide receivers to run under the ball on these long throws. I'll be very confident about Tennessee's chances against Alabama. I just haven't seen that Nico in the last two games and maybe the last 2.5 to 3 games. And for the Volunteer fans that expect Nico to be that guy, we need to give him some grace. He is in fact a sophomore. He is in fact still learning. And Bobby Hill's going to stick with him through thick and thin. As fans, so should we.
Act 2, Good Television is Good. Watch The Terror on Netflix.
I wanted to do a recurring series or a recurring segment called Good Television is Good, and then feature a television show that I thought was worth watching. And unfortunately, there aren't enough good television shows out there for me to do a recurring segment. Since I'm trying to be more positive, I'm trying to look at things from below instead of above. I don't want to do a segment called Bad Television is Bad and just have to sit through and eat shit, watch terrible television shows so that I could review them on this podcast. I did that once for The Bachelorette, and it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life watching the motion picture box. But on that rare occasion, I do come across a show that is worth commenting on because it's worthy of watching. No matter what genre of television you like, no matter what you prefer, there are shows out there that are so good that everyone should be exposed to them. And one of them is The Terror. It's a television show that you can now see on Netflix, but it's an AMC property. So the television show was originally aired on AMC. And if I recall correctly, it was in like 2018 that it came out. And I can remember watching television commercials for it and was excited to see it. And they made a decision. AMC, the executives made a decision as they were launching their premium service, their pay-for premium service, that they were going to release the show on AMC Plus exclusively. So if you wanted to see it, you had to get AMC Plus. And I said to that, go fuck yourself. So when I saw that it was released on Netflix, I recognized the name of the show and I recognized the lead actors. Many of you will not be able to name them, but you'll say, oh, I know that guy from X, Y, and Z. So who's in this show? Well, let's see. Jared Harris, who most of you will remember was Lane Price from Mad Men. It also has Tobias Menzies. He's been in a number of things that I've loved. He was the leader of the Wildlings in Game of Thrones. He was the right-hand man, the number 2 of the protagonist in There Will Be Blood. The premise of the show is that in 1845, a British expedition is put together to find a passage through the Arctic. They're finding a passage through the Arctic Circle to China. So they're trying to find a shorter way to get from England to China than having to go and sail around Africa and India. The treachery, of course, is the ice. One of the names of the expeditionary ships is the Terror. I do not think it's a spoiler alert, but everything doesn't go swimmingly and they don't immediately find a passage into China. No, they are trapped by ice. And you have the dynamic of what it is for these men to have to go through an extended period of time trapped by ice with the fear and the doubt of whether or not they're ever going to get home again. Oh, but there's more, dear listener. There's more. There's a supernatural element, part of the Eskimo community that they happen upon, and that's where I will stop. That's where I will not give any more information because that would be a spoiler alert. This is a very English-centric show. So the cast is English. It is a lot of heavy English accents. And as we know, the English are generally the best actors. So the acting in this television show is superb. Unfortunately for many of us, because we aren't English, and we're not going to follow a Cockney accent that quickly. We're not going to follow a Scottish or an Irish accent that quickly, particularly when they're starting to use colloquialisms or slang. Yes, the subtitles might have to go on. Did I tell you to watch Peaky Blinders? Yes, I did. Did I tell you that it was worth putting on the subtitles to get through a Peaky Blinders episode if you didn't know what the characters were saying? Yes, I did. Was I correct? Yes, I was. I've never had anyone who I've suggested watch that show come back and say, I just didn't like it. Wasn't a good television program. Watching a television show of that caliber, it's like exercise. Yes, you actually have to undertake. You have to go through an endeavor. That undertaking, that endeavor being reading subtitles. But in the end, it's worth it. The Terror has a darker vibe similar to The Walking Dead, where although you've got this external, this supernatural, ominous thing foreboding over all of the members of this show, the dynamic between the cast, the characters, that's where all of the drama lies. And then it's mixed in with having to manage what is an unmanageable supernatural situation. As most of you know, because you know me personally, I am a history buff, so the fact that the show takes place in 1845 and the premise behind it is one that was very important to the British Empire at that time, finding a passage to China, that played on my sympathies as well. I was already drawn in, and the show does an impeccable job at creating a period piece with the uniforms, with all of the props, not only with the ships, but with the Antarctic climate as well. The characters are real and believable, including the Eskimos. They aren't just props to help advance the story. They have their own storyline and their own character arcs. Oh, there's plot twists and turns. You develop a strong affinity for some characters, a strong dislike of others. And the show does a good job of creating a general sympathy for anyone, regardless of whether or not you like them or dislike them, stuck in a situation where they don't know whether or not they're going to survive. They don't know whether or not they're ever going to see home again. The Terror on Netflix. It's only 10 episodes. It's about 45, 50 minutes per episode, so it's easy to chew through. Good television is good.
Act 3. Let's go Mets.
I'm recording this short segment on Saturday, the 19th. I was too wound up to record it last night, although that was my plan. I didn't know whether or not I'd be recording a epitaph to the 2024 New York Metropolitans or whether or not I'd be able to give them a send-off as they head to L.A. I'm sure they actually left for L.A. last night. The Metropolitan Bats woke up and took the Dodgers for an exciting and pivotal Game 5. And the question is, will those Bats stay awake for Games 6 and 7? Now, I love these two players that I'm about to talk about, but they had not been hitting in the series, and it was necessary to take them out of the lineup, and that's Iglesias and Martinez. And the New York media, many pundits were speculating as to how long that Mendoza, the manager of the Mets, could stick with those two without them being productive in the lineup. And I admire his answer, his response over the course of games 3, 4, and 5 that I want to stick with the guys that got us here. You know, Iglesias had a ton of big hits in the last couple of weeks of the season and then in a number of the series leading up to this series against LA. And Martinez is one of the most professional hitters in Major League Baseball. But people go through slumps, and Iglesias was slumping. Martinez has been in a slump for probably the last month, if not the last month and a half. One of the Mets' major strengths is their depth. They have a lot of guys that they can insert into the lineup, and they are confident about putting these guys in because they've seen them produce. The teammates have seen them produce. The manager has seen them produce. One of the weaknesses of the Mets is their bullpen. So how is it that you can use your depth in the lineup and you can protect against your weaknesses? Well, you've got to run up as many runs as you can, as early as you can, to keep your starters in the game, even if they're giving up runs, because you do not want to let your bullpen get exposed to that Dodgers lineup. It all comes down now to Sunday. It's a one-game playoff for the Mets, just like they've faced pretty much for the last 2 weeks of the season, leading up to the extra games that they had to play. Not extra, technically they were rain-out games, but the doubleheader they had to play against the Braves just to see whether or not they were going to make the playoffs. The Mets have been here. If they can win Game 6, force a Game 7, they will put the pressure back on the Dodgers, who have been the perennial favorites for the entire season. It'll be interesting to see the Dodgers operate under the same kind of pressure that the Mets have been operating on for the last couple of weeks. Game 6 in LA, baby. Let's go Mets. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.